My religious mother thinks my Pokémon cards are demonic tools to cast spells on people. Okay, straight off the bat I should warn you guys that there are no huge gotcha or payback moments for this story, mostly because the entitled parent in question here is my own mother. And honestly, I struggle to see if she's entitled or just crazy. But considering how many things she's taken from me, I'd say entitled. Read on and you'll understand. I'd like to start by saying I love my mother to death, but she's crazy as all heck. I grew up in a very religious family, and I myself am still a religious man. But heck, my family is huge and has so many darned problems that not only do I have Am I the Jerk content for days, but I think there is to some degree a necessary level of crazy in my family anyway just to survive. Early on in my life, in grade school, I learned just how annoyingly controlling and entitled my mother could be. Who here remembers the mid to late 90s Pokémon card craze? In my old grade school days, Pokémon cards were like fat stacks of cash, and Game Boys were like Lamborghinis. I had to bribe with food, trade, suck up and bet my way into the world of Pokémon just so I could have even the slightest touch of the experience. I managed to get my hands on a few junk cards like Magikarp and something else the other kids didn't bother caring about. But finally having a Pokémon card was like winning the frickin' lottery twice in the same day. Cue Mother Dearest. Did I mention my family were crazy religious? I still remember it to this day, watching the tattered confetti of my Pokémon cards catching in the wind as she tore them up and threw them out of the window and said, "These devil cards will make you demon-possessed. Do you want to get demon-possessed and eat your brothers in some crazy blood ritual sacrifice?" Yeah, it really was that bad. Years later, a friend sent me his Game Boy. His family was very well off, and of course mine was very, well, not. I hid that machine as best as I could, far deep into the mess that was my room. But when I came home the next day, I don't know how or why, but my whole room was tossed and there was a massive pile of crud on the table as my mother was sitting there with a "we have to talk" look. Apparently she found the Game Boy, the 2 extra games, and a small pile of toys that she, for some reason, thought were Game Boy related as well as some candy rocks I got in school and forgot about in my room. Why candy rocks were in the pile? She thought that they were illegal substances. I got the whole demon-possessed talk again and threats to be sent away to a boys' home if I didn't get my act together. She then threw out everything. It was only a little while later that I had to explain to my friends where his Game Boy had gone. He didn't take it too hard but did do the foolish thing and tried to get his parents to help and explain the situation. If you've ever had parents like this, you know how it's useless trying to talk sense into them. And when his parents got frustrated with mine, they just asked for them to pay back the cost of the Game Boy. Which thankfully they did, as they cared a lot about their standing in the community, even though she'll always deny it. But yeah, I ended up being grounded for nearly 6 months and I had to do extra work around the house to pay for what I did. Finally, into my late teenage years, I ended up going to a friend's house and I got to play D&D, which was the funnest thing I've ever got to play in my sad, sheltered life. It was glorious. I even played as a paladin, as I still loved and love my parents, and religion has always been a big part of our lives. So I even went all out with a creative heretic hunter kind of game style, and more thinking this was okay, this was good, right? I had a blast and, well, I made the fatal mistake of talking about it on the way home, and my mother heard the word spell when we were talking and went berserk. Just absolutely bonkers. I tried telling her we were heroes cleansing the world of evil. I tried to explain everything, which you should all know is just pouring military-grade napalm onto a house fire. I still remember telling her that Disney movies had magic in them all the time, and she swore to burn every Disney movie we had, but then forgot about it the next day. Or perhaps she realized how stupid it all was and pretended she never said that. I ended up being grounded for over a year, a grounding which, while it technically ended, didn't really end until I left for the Navy. I was older than 18 when I joined the Navy. Why did I listen to them even after I was a full adult? Well, it's got some good and some bad. While my mother is crazy, my dad isn't, but he is super old school, sink or swim. I had to follow the house rules to the absolute letter or I'd have less than an hour to gather my things and I'd be on the streets. I spent a few days in homeless shelters while trying to call their bluff. The Navy was a way out of that, and I did kinda want to go anyway. But it ended up being a wake-up call for me, and after I got back, I made a few more amazing wake-up call-style discoveries. My parents were especially hard on me for various reasons. First of all, I was only one of 8 children, and they couldn't really not be strict without everything doing everything they wanted and taking over the house. But mainly, my father saw my behaviors and knew right away that I was going to become the absolute worst entitled little crap bag the world had ever seen. The way I looked at the world back then was like I didn't even know other people existed. It was all about me and how I was offended and how others were so well off and about how I was the victim because I didn't get what I wanted. My dad saw that 10 miles away and let my mother go ham on me, bringing down the wrath of her crazy butt just so I would get used to the cruel realities of the world and not end up some choosing beggar entitled little crap bag. And hey, it worked, and I'm eternally thankful for my parents no matter how crazy they are. They still do crap these days. I do remember one little detail right before I left for the Navy. My mother kept screaming at me, shrieking that I was going nowhere and that I had to leave. I had to get my life going, to leave the next day, etc., etc. And the very first week I left for boot camp, the first mail call, I got 4 letters from my mother. If the dates were accurate, she wrote the first one before I even arrived. I later discovered that after I left, she adopted 2 cats, a dog, and 2 foreign exchange students. Say what you will about her crazy butt, her maternal instinct was still stupidly strong. If she doesn't have something to take care of and push towards progress, that woman will go nuts. And again, after the Navy, I felt really bad for her. The dozens upon dozens of times she sent me long letters and phone calls, over and over again begging me to come home, to spend time with her, and more. I spent the next year trying to be there for her, but when I got back, she went right back to telling me to get a life, go out there and do something, to move out and more. I did pretty quickly, and the very first day in my new apartment, I got a text begging me to come and visit. I'm still trying to find a way to politely tell her to get her brain checked. I love my crazy mum and I hope she doesn't have brain problems. There's a whole lot more to this and plenty of other stories, but I figured I'd keep it limited to this huge one because of something just literally minutes ago. I work nights, I literally sleep from 9 to 5, so I don't often get to go to church. My mum knows this but begs and pleads for me to go to church with her every chance she gets. So I decided to surprise her, sacrificing my sleeping schedule, falling asleep early, waking up and turning my whole sleep schedule on its head just so I could go to Easter Sunday church with her, like she asked 24 times leading up to this very day. As every time she asked, I had to tell her, if it's in the cards. And so I show up to their house, ready for church in my finest Sunday clothes. Guess where they are? 5 states over, doing I have no idea what with my grandfather. Begging and pleading for over a month, and I finally make the time, and they go halfway across the damned country away from me. I am not pleased. But heck, you can choose your friends, not your family. She might be crazy as heck, but I know she loves me to death, and I love her right back. Well, I admire you for still caring as much as you do about your family, author, but honestly, I think you're giving them way too much credit. I think your mother may well have an untreated condition of some sort from what you've alluded to with her episodes and her very erratic memory. The fact that she flies wildly between being incredibly lonely and wanting you to get the heck out of the house is not normal. I'm glad you had the resilience to get through this, but I think there are other people who grew up in households like this who do not come out at the other end okay. In fact, I'd wager a visit to a therapist might open you up to some of the quirks you might not have had without your particular upbringing. I understand that we're coming out of centuries of families adhering to a strict religious set of values, and that families that raise their kids to be Christian, Islamic, or whatever don't necessarily go this hard with the punishments, but there are almost certainly greater opportunities for mistreatment and manipulation within these sorts of environments. And the fact that you don't write about it for what it is, which is to say downright traumatizing, says that you might have had a degree more indoctrination than you realize, even if you didn't come out of it as a religious Fruit Loop. I'm glad it seems like you're out there functioning on your own, and I hope that you have other, less troubling relationships in your life now. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for telling my dad that if he chooses to attend my stepbrother's graduation, then he'd better forget about me? I'm an only child, 18, and my parents divorced when I was 8. My dad remarried when I was 12, and for a while, everything was fine. But after a few years of living there with them, I started to notice that my dad preferred my stepbrother, who's 13 now. They did more things together and started to ditch me to go to his games, his plays, and his tournaments. For every 10 things I invited my dad to, he only attended 1, maybe 2. His new wife always gave excuses like her son was younger than me and they were really close, and her son's dad wasn't involved. And she told me that at least I was lucky to have my dad with me, and specifically one who was willing to share his love. Well, my real mum told my dad tough crap and began to gather all my things as she aimed for sole custody when I was 13. She won it. It was only then that I saw my dad being hurt for me being taken away, because in his eyes, I was his little girl, and had been the stand-in for his little boy until he got my stepbrother. I started to spend some more time with my dad after I went into mum's custody, but only if he picked me up to do it, as he still missed most of the things, and I always resented him and his other family for that. Since this was my last year, I've had a lot of significant activities. I had my last debate, my last volleyball game, I won best essay in my class, got into best 20 alumni, and finally went to pick up my prom dress. Some, if not all of these things, he missed, because he was working or attending something regarding his family, and I can't have it anymore. My graduation is December 15th, the same as my stepbrother's elementary school, and when I told my dad, he said he'd see if he could make it, which meant that he wouldn't, so I came clean. I said that while graduating elementary school is nice, and yay for my stepbrother, I'm graduating freaking high school, and I'm on my way to university. So he really can't compare those things, and if he chose my stepbrother's graduation, he had better forget about me. His wife flipped and told him that I was taking my stepbrother's dad away from a big day and I was being a spoiled brat. I told her that I couldn't be a spoiled brat if I was being ignored the whole fricking time, and that I wasn't talking to her anyway. My dad looked shocked, so I said he could be there for once or he can miss forever and leave. But now that I'm cooled off, I'm starting to feel bad. I love my dad to pieces, I just want him to be there for me too. And I surely don't want to hurt a little kid like my stepbrother. I was wondering if I was a jerk for acting how I did because he's paying half of my college fund, and I gave him an ultimatum. Plus, my dad isn't prone to confrontation while my mother and I are. Oh my god. Well, this is just sad, and more than a little complicated. On the one hand, it's great that your dad has been so accepting and accommodating of his stepson, but yeah, that really shouldn't come with the cost of him neglecting his own flesh and blood daughter, who'd clearly like nothing better than to have more time with him. And more real talk, graduating high school is just more of a big deal for a kid than graduating elementary. This is before you go off into the wide world and work, or go to college or something. It's a big party for a lot of people most times. And yeah, I understand that you feel guilty. There were some harsh words exchanged in your last meeting with your dad. But it might also be the wake-up call that he needs to start playing more of a part in his daughter's life. If it's got to the point where there's a 90% non-attendance rate of things his daughter asks him to come to, that's a real problem right there. Especially if he's somehow breezed by this long without even thinking about it. So we're going to go with your ultimatum being very tough, but also completely understandable. You deserve as much as your dad's love and attention as your stepbrother, and he isn't delivering. So tell him as much. Rude, entitled parent in cinema gets instant karma. So this happened a while ago, but it made me happy, so I thought I'd share. Years ago, when The Dark Knight Rises had just been released, my boyfriend and I went to see the trilogy at the cinema. You know, 3 films back to back. I'm a teacher, and when we walk into the cinema, in the row behind us were about 6 of my A-level students. Great trip to the cinema with my class, I guess. Anyway, the story's not about them, but they do come into it later. We'd had a great afternoon and had watched Batman Begins and Dark Knight with no problems. My boyfriend had gone to get free refills of popcorn and Coke, so I was just chilling, playing a game on my phone, waiting for the final film to begin. Enter the entitled dad and 2 children in tow. He came straight up to me and said, "You're in my seat." Of course, this instantly got my back up. He could have said excuse me or been slightly polite, you know, like a normal human being. The joy of the situation was, of course, that I knew I was in the right and he was wrong before I even engaged in conversation with Mr. Entitled. Without even glancing up from my phone, you know, because he started with rudeness first, I said, "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are. This is my seat number. You're in our seats." "No, I'm not." Still looking at my phone. Yes, you are. This is my seat. I sighed and finally looked up at him. No, I'm not. Can I see your ticket, please, sir? I find being saccharine sweet to entitled people really annoys them. He shoved his ticket in front of me with a self-satisfied grin of triumph on his face. I should mention at this point the sixth formers just behind me had stopped eating popcorn and were avidly watching to see how the scenario would play out. I looked at his tickets. Ah, here's your problem, sir. Your seat is in screen 2. This, unfortunately, is screen 1. Entitled Dad snatches his tickets back and storms from the screen to the hysterical laughter of my 6 18-year-old students as I shouted after him, "No need to apologize, sir. Happy to help. We all make dumb mistakes, don't we?" So anyway, I enjoyed that exchange so much I thought you guys might as well. The thing is, if he'd just been polite, he wouldn't have humiliated himself or his poor kids. Oh, you magnificent jerk vigilante. This guy absolutely deserved everything he got. And don't be too sad about his kids. You know for a fact they were probably going to enjoy giving him crap about it for years to come. I can tell you if my poor father made a blunder like that, me and my fellow snotty-nosed siblings would have never let him forget about it. It's what families are for. Oh, and I guess sometimes love, support, and compassion, but mostly it's about holding things over each other's heads and never letting up. I'm glad the author was able to keep their cool and draw it out as long as they possibly could. A hotter head might have just checked, cussed them out, and not had it be so perfect. I honestly don't know that I would have remembered the cinema number when I got in. That kind of thing goes straight out of my head once I'm in the damn movie, so good for you. We need that house more than you because we have kids. A quick vent. 5 years ago, my husband and I bought a house. We had been saving for years for the down payment, and the stars must have aligned for us to get it. Everything worked out perfectly. This house was a major fixer-upper, but it had land, and we were happy with that. Turns out my brother-in-law had looked at the house when it was listed as well. He decided it was too much work to fix up and not worth it. They wanted major upgrades too, whereas my husband and I are very simple people. We don't need granite countertops or a soaking tub or hardwood throughout. Met up with the family recently, and the brother-in-law was talking about how cramped their condo has become with 2 kids now. He decided that this was the time to tell us that we should trade houses. I crap you not. Brother-in-law is very, very entitled. He proceeded to argue that we are only 2 people and their family is growing and could use the space. Literally suggested that we give ours to him and buy out his condo. I laughed. I knew he was serious, but I couldn't help but laugh. I'd never in my life imagined someone could be so darn entitled that they demand someone give up their home for the sake of another family. Are you kidding me? Brother-in-law then got mad at me for not even considering it and began justifying all the reasons his family needed our house more. Oh, you think this would be the worst part, right? No, it gets better. We never finished the basement, so there was only 1 bathroom in the house. Brother-in-law informed me that if we were to trade houses, that we'd need to make some major upgrades first, because he wouldn't have time to be able to make any renovations. He was somehow inexplicably certain that I'd see the logic in his plan and just trade houses with them, because they needed the extra space so much more. And now my brother-in-law isn't talking to me because I laughed throughout the whole thing and wouldn't take him seriously. Win-win. Go ahead, punish me by not talking to me. At least then you'll stop trying to make me the bad guy because I have 2 spare rooms I don't use, apparently. My husband and I each have an office, by the way. Oh, and go ahead, brother-in-law, tell everyone how horrible I am because I wouldn't buy out your condo at market value while giving you ours out of the goodness of our hearts. Last I heard, he was trying to tell my father-in-law to retire and move into the city so that my brother-in-law could have that farm. Joke's on him. Father-in-law already talked about it and has left the farm to me and my husband in his will. Because we actually farm, and brother-in-law thinks it's too much work. I always thought that the internet exaggerated the people like this existing. I thought situations like this couldn't possibly be real. What the heck are these people thinking? Good lord, how has this guy cropped up in the same family as a completely reasonable brother and father? Sounds like he has roughly 3 Karens worth of entitlement stored up inside him. Any single one of his demands would have made him a jerk, but apparently it's not enough to make your siblings pay you money for a house exchange that seems to exclusively benefit you. You also have to get them to fork out the money to renovate it before the switch. If the author and her hubby actively farm, what are they going to do with your condo? This is all heading towards a big old family row at some point, And sadly, I doubt it will be as funny then. Still, at least we can all stand at a safe distance and just marvel at the sheer impressive entitlement on display. Just wow. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Or if you want to check out some great music, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, give Am I the Genius a shot. Everything linked in the description.